All right, welcome in to another episode of Buzz Beat. We are live Monday, May 12th. We are reacting to one of the most wild NBA draft lotteries that I can remember. Maybe a little bit of recency bias coming in for me there, but this really was a pretty remarkable turn of events for a variety of ways. If you haven't seen already, the draft order will start with the Dallas Mavericks, who came into the night with a 1.8% chance of getting the number one overall pick. And now that is the number one pick is headed to the Mavericks. Number two pick will be San Antonio, the Spurs. Number four, number three, the Philadelphia 76ers and the Charlotte Hornets, who came into the night tied with Utah and Washington for the best odds of getting the number one overall pick, 14%. They fall back one slot and they will have the number 4 pick in the draft. There's much to discuss, including some other teams that dropped even further than the Hornets, Utah, and Washington. We've got a full house. This is or close to a full house, not quite a full house. It's getting pretty crowded in the BuzzBeat expanded universe these days. But I'm Brian Geisinger. Tonight, I'll be joined by several of my co-hosts. We've got Darian, James, and Professor Emeritus Spencer Percy is making an appearance. So we want to welcome everyone back. I would ask all at one time how you guys are doing, but just for the sake of keeping things rolling, Spencer, I'll send it to you first. How are you doing, man? It's good to see you again. Welcome back. I wish we were celebrating a little bit, but just sort of your initial thoughts and reactions to the Hornets ending up with the number 4 pick and teams like San Antonio and Dallas vaulting up to picks 1 and 2 respectively.
Yeah, I wish I was joining on better terms. It's great to be here. Wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not. Unfortunately, we had to sit through that TV break to hear our names called first. I almost rather it was fifth at this point, so I could have gotten set up and just kind of moved on. But yeah, I had to stay clued in for a few more seconds. I was I was just thinking. I don't know what year this is with the new lottery rules. That 3 teams each get 14%. It's got to be the first time that all 3 of those teams with the highest odds, none of them get a top 3 pick. I would think that's the first time that that's happened. I don't know. It makes me just question whatever you believe about the NBA lottery, whether that be the karmic forces here, the basketball gods, just legit odds that come out of a machine with a bunch of ping pong balls. But Dallas getting the first pick just really rubs me in the wrong direction following one of the most confusing trades in NBA history, them trading Luka. It was discussed, I think it was on Lowe's pod today. I was listening to him and Mahoney kind of talk about what if I think it was Lowe's pod, maybe it wasn't. What if the Mavs got the first pick, and what would that say about the basketball gods? So I officially don't believe in the basketball gods because this doesn't seem like justice. I don't think.
Yeah, this it's tough. This is I'm sure for media covering the league, people involved in the league, I'm sure this is a tough pill to swallow. That 3.5 months after what I think was one of the most ridiculous and absurd and just patently bad transactions I've ever seen in professional sports, that the number 1 pick lands with the Dallas Mavericks, and Cooper Flagg heading there to play with, I guess Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, PJ Washington, former Hornets great. But before we sort of delve into that a little bit further, James, I'll swing it to you. What was your mindset heading into the commercial break for the Hornets? They're safely in the top 4. You don't know where they're going to land, but where were you between sort of heading into that last commercial break and coming out of it? And how do you feel now, moments later? Okay. All right. Actually, you know what, Darian, I'll swing that question to you. If you could hear me, it looks like James is having some technical difficulties. Apologies. We'll try to get him back online. But Darian, what was your mindset heading into that commercial break and then having the bubble popped in terms of Charlotte's hopes moments afterwards?
I mean, in pure Hornets pessimistic fashion, I knew we weren't going to get the top. I figured top three. I felt like it was going to be one of those times where we're so close, but this didn't even feel close. It just felt like once that commercial break started, it just felt as though I just knew we were going to get four. It was going to be more than just a disappointment. I think we were talking about it before we started. It's not that we didn't get the top pick. It's the Mavericks. At this point, I'm starting to wonder, what do you have to do to get? Like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, we saw the Hawks get it last year. We saw Dallas get it this year. We saw the Spurs like get Wemby, which that was like a thing that everybody thought, oh, the Spurs are going to get Wemby. So it just doesn't feel like there's anything to ever. The bad teams don't actually get to reap the benefits. And as a team that we've talked about on this podcast, we probably won't be that good next year. It's like, what does that say, for people who are simply just tired of it? Like, and it's nothing the team can necessarily do to fix their odds, but I could see this season people are like, I don't even want to entertain the idea of tanking unless we absolutely have to. But I don't know. It's frustrating, but I mean, that's just the way it is. And this luck, I see a lot of other people already being surprised by what transpired. As Hornets fans, this is not new to us. So that may be why it doesn't hurt that bad, but it still sucks either way.
Yeah, James, I'll swing it to you here now. Thoughts on the events of tonight in the 2025 lottery?
Look, the key message here is going to be that tanking doesn't work, right? Just look where Utah, Charlotte, Washington fell. But what did Dallas, San Antonio, Philadelphia do for the last quarter of the season? They tanked, right?
Yeah.
They shut guys down, and now really the refined lottery odds I was supportive of, even though it worked against the Charlotte Hornets. I think for the wider competition of the NBA, I was supportive of it because it was supposed to stop tanking. But really what it's done is it's just made tanking go like even higher, because you can be a better team and have, you can lose 5 out of 6 games to end the year, and all of a sudden you've got a better chance to move up. So I don't know if that argument's going to stick. Look, it's not the worst case scenario. This could have been a lot worse. If we were sitting here like New Orleans or Washington, it would be worse. 4, it was still going to get a really good player. I think a lot of people seem to believe there is like a bit of a mini tier after 4, with Cooper Flag, Dylan Harper 1 and 2. Then you've got kind of Ace Bailey and VJ Edgecombe seem to be in a bit of a mini tier. I know on a lot of our big boards, that's the way it is. So look, the Hornets are going to get a really good player. Are they going to get a player that changes the face of their franchise now? I think that is less likely. And I think that was in play if they'd landed in the top 2. But hey, whoever those other teams are, that was always going to be in like, it just sucks as Dallas, right? With that 2027 first round pick. They look like they were out of cards to play, and they've literally pulled an ace out of nowhere on the river to win the hand. And it's quite remarkable.
Yeah, to think that there was this moment of time a few months ago, and after the initial completion of the Mark Williams trade before the Lakers backed out of that, where all of a sudden we Spencer, remember you and I recorded a pod where we were sort of talking about just how valuable some of the incoming picks that the Hornets had were, and then they lose a swap and an unprotected first round pick, which is basically basketball gold. And then now you would have to think that the 2027 pick via Dallas into Charlotte, which was looking really good throughout the season, and now that likely is probably not going to be as coveted of an asset as it seemed to be, even 30, 60 minutes ago. I suppose there's a slim chance that Dylan Harper could slip to 4th. I think that's unlikely because he is, I think, pretty clearly the second best prospect in this draft, and a player type that teams like San Antonio and Philadelphia, even who have like good young guards in the mix, De'Aaron Fox in San Antonio, Steph Castle, and then Philadelphia, obviously Maxey and McCain. Harper to me seems like he's too good to pass up on, but I suppose we can, if there's a slimmer of hope that maybe he falls. But I think for the most part, we're going to be looking at the tier of players that is Ace Bailey, Trey Johnson, CMB, Con Knipple, come on Malawach. Like, I think that's where we're going to be looking at. And I think this is stating the obvious, but I think it's going to be worth monitoring what Philadelphia was wanting to do with their pick, because I think that's going to really inform. I mean, maybe they go Bailey at 3, maybe Bailey slips to 4. If he's there at 4, the Hornets are, maybe they snap him up. If Bailey goes 3 to Philadelphia, then things I think really open up for the Hornets in terms of like what they may want to do, whether it's Edgecombe, Johnson, CMB, Knipple. Like we'll be able to rattle off these names, and we're going to be able to study and talk about them throughout the next few weeks and months. Spencer, I'll bring it back to you here. Any thoughts on what the teams ahead? Like, do you think any of the teams ahead of Charlotte could potentially move off of those picks? Like, do you think Dallas? I mean, I'm assuming they're going to just draft Cooper Flag and roll
maybe not
with
that
it.
one.
Yeah, probably not that one. But any of those other teams, do you think they could those picks could be moved around at all?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that. I mean, I think there's a chance Dallas at least takes the temperature from Milwaukee's, but from Milwaukee about what it would take in addition to the number 1 pick to get Giannis, because it would take something. They don't have the young talent that say a San Antonio does. I mean, I think that's the most likely candidate of those 3 teams to shop that number 2 pick, along with the Stephen Castle and other things. I think that definitely gets a conversation started for Giannis. And I know it's been a chitter chatter of the league, even before Giannis really dipped his big toe into the water about saying, yeah, I think I need to look elsewhere, imagining Giannis and Wembanyama next to each other, which is frightening. But I would say San Antonio, even above Dallas, might be the real winner in this whole draft lottery, because now they have the ammo to really go get Giannis. We'll see if that's what they think is best long term for their franchise and for Victor, with as young as he is. But yeah, I definitely think that there's going to be a lot of talk about one of those 2 picks being moved. Particularly for Giannis. BG, I really wanted to talk about from Charlotte's perspective. I know it's not the question you asked me, but kind of zooming out and like, what does this do to their long-term strategy and short-term strategy around team building, around how they attack free agency this summer, around how they look at trade opportunities this summer? I can't imagine that over time, as this sets in for the Hornets, I can't imagine it's not going to tweak their how they approach team building in the next few years. Last year, Charlotte, the decision was kind of made for them about how they were, going to tank, and that was, particularly through injuries. I don't think they went into last season saying we're definitely going to be one of the worst 3 teams in the league. I think the injuries made that decision for them, versus what James was saying earlier about Dallas, San Antonio pulling the plug, second half of the season and resting guys and putting themselves in the best possible situation from an odds perspective. But I do think that Charlotte might look at like a Portland path a little bit more closely and try to thread the needle in this for a semi-competitive roster, barring health, right? Like if LaMelo Ball plays 65 to 70 games last season, Mark Williams the same, like Charlotte probably wins close to 30 games. They might win north of that. So there is a competitive team in here somewhere. But anyways, I say all that. My point is, I do think that this is going to get Jeff Peterson ownership, a lot of the front office folks thinking about like, what is our next step in team building? And I don't think it's going to be pulling the plug next season, unless we get an injury riddled season again.
Do we think Charlotte should explore moving up to 2 for Dylan Harper? Like if San Antonio are taking calls, look, I'm guessing they'd have a lot of teams who'd be looking to do that. But is that something we think the Hornets should do? I'm guessing it would be like a future first normally to move like 2 spots. I think like the Markel Fultz, Jason Tatum one was like a future first. I've seen that in a couple of others. So like if it was like this, I don't know, the Dallas or the Miami pick to move up to 2, is that something you guys would consider?
I would say You just got me thinking about this as you asked the question. I would say the more likely scenario is that this heats up the LaMelo trade talks, because that is Charlotte's path to staying in the long-term plan time type of strategy, if that makes sense. Like, I think this is a disappointing result for them, and if somebody blows them away for LaMelo, now they might be more willing to look at that.
I tend to agree, because it's like if you get flagged, you just follow that path. And I think James, we talked about this along with Darian. We talked about this a few weeks ago, that like if they did draft Cooper, there's a chance that maybe the Hornets would just sort of like run it back with a lot of the sort of like core guys and just see how it goes with LaMelo and Brandon Miller next to Cooper. And yeah, I could see this potentially changing some of those pathways, and potentially opening up the possibility for the Hornets to shop LaMelo. And I would at least take, generally speaking, I don't like trading up, but I think it's worth like at least having meetings on something like this to potentially get up and take a swing at Harper. It seems unlikely that this would that's the route that they would pursue, but certainly worth like kicking the can on. Darian, any thoughts on some of these topics that we're exploring?
I'll try to go quick before my neighbor comes back on this side of their cutting their grass. But
are they cutting the grass or mowing the lawn?
They're doing it all.
And
It's 7 o'clock. I don't know why they're doing. Granted, I'm not. Side note. Granted, they're both like 80, so they have people do their yard for them. So maybe this is their time. So I'll try to go really quick. But I think their whole plan. It seemed like the whole plan was to get Cooper. Like all of this was in their minds. It was to get Cooper. So as James and really as everybody has said, now that hasn't happened, I think you do have to think about trading LaMelo, because that's the only way you can continue with the plan. I don't think that that's something I've said. I'm pretty sure other people have said it too. You can't keep, however you feel about LaMelo or not, you can't hold him hostage and hope that one day the cards will align. While now we're paying him. It was cool when he was on his rookie deal, but now we're paying him. And then we've all talked about like, all right, now, what's in the air with Mark Williams, because he's not traded anymore. So, they're paying Miles Bridges. They're paying, we realize that Josh Green's making more. Grant Williams is making money off an injury. So it's not the same as before where they felt as though it would all fall into their lap. It's more so we're paying guys and something needs to happen. And right now, I think this is the worst outcome, not in terms of the draft. I agree with that. But in terms of what their plan was, I don't think there's any way you could shake this unless you either trade up or get lucky. That Dylan Harper specifically falls. And maybe even Ace Bailey if you really want to go on that, like the scheme we're trying to run. But yeah, I think the whole plan from the get-go was this draft. I don't think it was next year. I don't think it was the year after. I think it was this draft. And considering we fell at 4, I think that there's just a lot of things that need to be in place. And then if you do trade it for Dylan Harper, that opens up a whole can of worms if LaMelo's not traded by then. So,
look, the big win for all of this for the Hornets, and there is a big win, and it's really for us in talking about this, is we get an interesting conversation, right, for the next month plus. If it had been number 1, it's like, how do we do 5 weeks of Cooper Flag? And look, we would have done it. But now there's actually a conversation to be had. There's a group of guys, who's going to be there. Like some people say it's as simple as like, just take whichever one is Ace Bailey versus VGK Edgecombe Falls. Like that will probably be the default position I expect of most Hornets fans. And I don't think it's a bad position to be in. I think Ace Bailey's going to be a really divisive prospect. And he is amongst our BuzzBeat Big Board rankings that you've got for our subscribers, that you can see. But there's going to be people who would think that he's the highest upside pick outside of Cooper Flag. And there'll be guys who think that he shouldn't be a lottery pick. I think John Hollinger had him like in the mid-teens in his big board that got released the other day. Like he is going to be super divisive. So look, I think, what do we think the odds that one of Edgecombe or Ace Bailey or a Hornet on draft night right now? I'd probably put that at 60, 70%, something like that. If you made me put a percentage on it.
I was going to say like better than 50, but under 2/3, kind of like that to me seems like the most likely outcome. I mean, just the first 2 picks are chalk, and then you just react to whatever Philly does at 3. If they go Edgecombe, you take Ace. And I should say too, like I think I'm generally amongst the co-hosts on this pod, like I'm probably a little lower on Ace, though I do quite like him. Him in the mid-teens I don't see that at all. I know he had some like maybe disappointing measurements at the combine today, but I still think he plays with I think there's still too much there. Tall wings who can shoot like that and can do that kind of stuff defensively, have a high floor. So I don't see him sliding nearly that far. If people want more information on Bailey or Harper, we put out a pod last week scouting those 2 guys. That is definitely worth your time. We'll certainly have more Bailey content coming down the pipeline, along with Edgecombe, who we've talked about some on here already. And then probably I do think we're going to need to talk about Trey Johnson a little bit more too. Had some good numbers. Had some good numbers at the combine today, shooting up with a almost 6'11" wingspan. And with that jump shot and some of the creation and the passing flashes he has, like he's going to be a name certainly to consider. I think Matt recently put out a scouting report on him as well too. So someone will have to dive in a little bit further on, but some good names like the Hornets should be able to still draft a really stellar prospect at 4, which is exciting. If some people have mentioned, like the disappointment doesn't necessarily lie in that, although it's a bummer to miss on Cooper. It's sort of just like seeing the teams that were able to jump up and get into the top 3 of this draft. It's just a little hard to stomach when one of them has Victor Wembanyama, like the best young prospect in the world. One of them was in the NBA Finals last year with the Dallas Mavericks,
at least in the West,
and just got done.
That's the good news.
Yeah. And then the other one is the Sixers, who like came into this past season with potentially, Eastern Conference Finals expectations before, the Embiid injury, and they just sort of like collapsed. So I don't know. Any other, do you guys want to talk a little bit more about prospects? I was even thinking maybe we could just, if not, maybe all 4 of us could just pump out our like a quick, top quick little like mock top 4, top 5 picks for each player or for each person.
I was going to mention real quick. Yeah, regulator. I mentioned it here in the chat. Thank you. Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth. I think trading down is something that we haven't spoken to yet and need to consider. I mean, you look at a team like New Orleans, desperate. I would say their GM's on the clock. Zion, where his contract stands on the clock. That's a team at 7 I would think is interested. Houston at 10. I know that they're going to go, big game hunting in free agency or sign and trade or trade in general this summer. But I think there's another team that just has too many rotation players. Might be interested in moving up. I mean, the good thing about, if there is a good thing about dropping to 4, a divisive prospect, as James mentioned, like an Ace Bailey, there's going to be a team, likely a team from 5 to 14, in that lottery range that's going to fall in love with a guy like that and might be willing to move off an asset, maybe a bad contract, swap positions in this year's draft and throw you a first in the future. I think that's something that Charlotte should be looking at as well, depending on how far back they need to move. But trade up, as James mentioned, trade down, zooming out. What's our team building strategy? I mean, it's literally all on the table with how this ended up.
I would be all for trading back and trying to pick up an extra pick and sort of like scale back to the middle of the lottery and add an asset. Certainly something they should be exploring. James or Darian, any thoughts on the potential of Charlotte maybe looking to move down a few rungs in the lottery and scoop up an extra pick?
I think it's more likely if Ace Bailey's there. I think for teams like Washington and Utah, New Orleans, I think that's the name that probably makes more sense, especially for Washington, who are looking for that kind of like offensive focus. And just like there's more upside potential there. Okay, you can squint and see a version of Ace Bailey being like maybe like the second best offensive usage player on your team. I think that's less so with some of those other names that you're going to see there, and like Trey Johnson and Conk Nipple and Vijay Edgecombe. You often don't see people like move up into the top 4 to draft like, I don't know, a 3-and-D wing. Like you just don't see that. You go for guys who you can build something around, and Ace Bailey just fits that profile a lot more for me. So yeah, I think that would be the most likely one. That Philadelphia one is so interesting. I think both San Antonio and Philadelphia could explore trading those picks. It really doesn't make much sense for them to add like Ace Bailey. Like we talked about this in the last pod, he needs to be retaught how he plays basketball. He got great talent potential, but like, can Philly really? I don't know. Just like, are they just going to sit him in a corner? Like, you don't draft in the top 3 for that. And I don't even know what the apron is doing for them. Like the luxury tax, like getting a salary of a number 3 overall pick. Does that then make the rest of their offseason more difficult? So maybe trading back and picking up like a Con Knipple, who's a more complementary player around their core, and cutting some salary. Maybe that would be of motivation as well. So there's going to be a lot of trade buzz, especially with that Philly pick, because Daryl Morey has been a pro and done this for a long time. He's going to get and extract maximum value for that.
Yeah, I would be, with the way that this shook out in the top 3, especially San Antonio and Philly 2-3, I would be pretty surprised if Ace Bailey is not there for forward Charlotte, which, I'll plant my flag. I would not be real thrilled if I don't think Ace Bailey is the place. Charlotte is the place for Ace Bailey to thrive in his development. The way this roster is currently constructed, and the age timeline it's on, but yeah, I just don't see Philly or San Antonio selecting him with where they are.
Yeah, Washington, I could see there being an appeal to just position themselves for Bailey, just because they are on like a development patient timeline. I think sort of similar to the Hornets, but there may be a little bit even behind, just because the Hornets have a player like LaMelo, which sort of, I don't know if that accelerates any things, but they do have a all-star guy on a second contract, which happens to be to be a max. So yeah, maybe there's a lever to play there. Any other prospect names, guys, that we should be considering, or other pathways that the Hornets could consider with this number 4 overall pick?
I mean, so who mentioned so far? We mentioned Trey. We mentioned VJ, Ace Bailey, Con Knipple. Does anyone put forward a name with any confidence outside of those 4, like they think they would genuinely consider?
If we would have traded, if we would have traded Mark Williams, certainly Malioch. Did I say that right? Malawach, sorry.
Malawach.
I would say him. Yeah. I mean, but no. I like Jeremiah Fears, but 4 is way too rich for that. Yeah.
Also, another guy that it's going to take a little while. I like that he touches the paint. I mean, they'll consider all of these guys. I still think they could consider Malawach or Queen, especially if they're potentially going to be looking to move Williams at some point. I'm not sure, like, long term, how long this marriage between player and franchise will go. So they could still be looking for center in that range. I guess, are there any international prospects they could consider at that spot? That's probably a little too early for Noah Essengay, but I suppose you have to maybe at least consider him as a possibility. That would be too early for me. I'd be looking probably most likely at the domestic players here, but I suppose that's another name to at least throw into the mix. I know someone was making fun of me in the comments earlier for mentioning Colin Murray-Boyles, but I do think that that's a name worth considering at 4-2. He had some favorable measurements at the combine today. High field player, good defender, can pass, can score inside a lot, can play make, can do a lot of stuff on both sides of the floor. And I know he's older because he's a second-year player. I know he can't really shoot from beyond the arc, and the free throw shooting is just okay at about 70-71%. But he does a lot of stuff well. So he's one other guy that I would I probably would consider in that range.
Hey, BG, not to
Yeah.
be hyperbolic or get too carried away, but I think people have because I watched a fair amount of Murray Boyles at South Carolina this season too. Bad team, so he stuck out big time. Has such a great feel. Not comparing him to Draymond Green, but when you have to, if you haven't seen Murray Boyles play, would you at least like put him in the same spectrum of type of player? Really good defender, plays super hard, good rebounder, can score, like you said, can't shoot, but like would play the same kind of role.
Potentially. It's Draymond is a tough. We all know this. Everyone listening to it knows this. He's a hard guy to comp to because he's like a one of one.
Sure.
But I do CMB. I do see the defensive playmaking components to his game. He measured very similar to Draymond at the combine, comparing the 2025 combine to the 2012 combine. And a guy that, I think like has the ability, the potential to be someone that could also be a hub for you offensively. Could initiate in the high post. You could throw it to him at the elbow. Can play, can play, make plays and make reads on the short roll. And then defensively, I actually think you could hypothetically, you would see Charles Lee do some cool stuff with him too. Whether you'd cross match and put Murray Boyles to guard opposing fives and switch those pick and pop actions up top, or let him be on the back line and sort of like rove around. He has really good hands. I think his play recognition and his anticipation skills are quite good too. So yes, I think if you're high on him, it's because of his playmaking components on both sides of the floor. And you're just sort of like hoping you can piece together a spot up, catch and shoot jumper, which like he's shown some flashes of it, but at this point it's far from a certainty that that's going to be a thing that really fully develops for him. So, but yeah, I think there are some overlap from like an archetype standpoint, but obviously Draymond is like the apex version of the sort of like undersized, defensive savant, front court playmaker type.
Right, exactly. Not to compare the two. That's just it's hard to think of an archetype like comparison for a more Murray Boyles. Yeah,
there's some like I don't know. There's some like I mean it's like it's maybe like a little it's like a little it feels like a little trite, but like he, maybe it's because he's left-handed and wears the number 30. Like, but his power game offensively, like, does, so I think sometimes you can see, Julius Randle type abilities with his, with his sort of like power game components. Right. So I think there are a few guys you can think of
Pascal Siakam,
that offer
another guy that I thought of as well. There's like a potential like the problem is that all these guys can shoot way better than Murray Boyles. Like right now, like and this is the thing. Like you play Colin Murray Boyles with a non-shooting big, you've got two non-shooters on the floor. And that's like, is he even going to be able to get on the floor like anything other than small ball five early in his career unless he develops that shot? And again, you're betting on a development leap for that to be the case. But unfortunately, that's going to be the case in most of these prospects the Hornets are going to be considering now. There's no sure thing anymore.
Yeah, he did measure today at the combine 7'1" wingspan with an 8'11" standing reach to 240 pounds. And 6'6.5" without shoes. So he'll also turn 20 in June. So certainly one of the, in terms of guys that the Hornets would be considering in this range, he is one of the potentially the older players. And yeah, he might be, again, top 5 might be a little too rich for him too. So any thoughts on, I mean, I guess we've talked about Bailey a fair amount. James, any thoughts about, like, let's say Bailey ends up going 3 to Philadelphia and Edgecombe is the guy, all of a sudden he becomes sort of like the top prospect mocked to the Hornets. Would you like to see Charlotte go Edgecombe, or would you rather them, and this, your opinion on this, by the way, can change, dozens of times between now and June, but would you prefer an Edgecombe over Knipple or Trey Johnson or someone else? And then again, this is if you're making the decision, not what you're like anticipating would be the call.
Look, it's tight. I've got all those 3 guys in the same tier. I I would probably lean Trey Johnson right now, which is a change from when we last spoke. But like, you could talk me, like, if they don't see a like primary or secondary like scoring option, Trey Johnson's future, then like, for me, that's the swing of the upside pick, is to go Trey Johnson, because he could be a really dangerous scorer in the NBA. Look, VJ Edgecombe is a guy we should probably talk about more, because everything Charles Lee and Jeff Peterson talk about is what VJ Edgecombe is all about. Like, just like, incredible kid, incredible work ethic. You hear the guys who follow the draft and cover it all year round, the way they talk about VJ Edgecombe is different. They're not just saying like, yeah, good kid. Like, they are profusely in love with the kid. And that means something. We've seen that. That's one of the main reasons they drafted T. Salon last year, was his attitude and his approach. He is a two-way player. He plays with like an incredible motor. He can get out in transition well, which is something that this team really struggled to do this year. He brings perimeter defense, again, something that Charles Lee is desperate for this team to defend, and he brings versatility on that end. So if you had to tell me right now, like, you know, you have to bet on one player who will be a Charlotte Hornet, Vijay Edgecombe is the pick, and it's not even close for me. Like, he is the guy. And if they don't pick Edgecombe and he's on the board, then it tells me like they say something publicly around like what they're about. But behind the scenes, there's like more depth to it than just like it's purely about what they're about in the court and the Hornets DNA. It shows me there's parts of the Hornets DNA that they're not saying publicly.
Yeah, I tend to agree that VJ Edgecombe is the likely pick at for Charlotte right now. I'm so torn between Edgecombe and Knipple. I think Knipple is the safer pick. I think that his floor is so incredibly high. He's going to be probably more of a specialist in the NBA, but I think that BG knows this. He went to every home game, for Duke, and covered Knipple closely. I'm sure there's more to his game than I think appears on paper, and I think he has a chance to be, a three-tool offensive player in the league. And he plays extremely hard defensively, and he's bigger. Like he's got a pro body right now, which is another thing that I think is a little overlooked with Knipple. I'm not well versed really on Trey Johnson just yet, so I need to do a little bit more homework there. But I kind of lean with you, James. I think Edgecombe and his athletic ability and how the Hornets like to play is the likely pick as we sit here right now.
Some other numbers that I think are worth considering. I saw someone talking about this on Twitter either yesterday or a couple days ago. I'm blanking on the name, but I went ahead and pulled the numbers from CBB Analytics. I will say there's some intriguing data with VJ Edgecombe in minutes that he played without Rob Wright on the court, who was Baylor's, I guess, primary point guard. Jeremy Roach obviously handled the ball a lot too. But in the minutes with Rob Wright on the court, Edgecombe scored 6.4 points in the paint per 40 minutes. That was where I believe 37% of his total points came from. In the minutes with Wright off the court, Edgecombe on the court, so VJ getting to handle the ball, maybe be a primary a little bit more, that points in the paint per 40 figure jumps up to 10.9 points in the paint per 40 minutes, with basically 53% of his total points coming in the paint. Like, there might be a little bit more like shot creation upside. I know the handle can be is a bit of a limiting factor with him, though I do think there was some growth with it throughout the season. I mean, some of the comps I've seen for Edgecombe have been, Jalen Suggs or D'Anthony Melton. How would you guys feel about getting a player like a Suggs player type, sort of like a 3-and-D 2-guard with very good athleticism at the fourth pick? Does that feel like good value?
I'll try to pitch in real quick. So I think that with that, part of it comes down to, do I feel as though the Hornets are that kind of player away from being decent? Because that was like one of the biggest things that, as much as I like VJ Edgecombe, that's one of the things that I've struggled with the last couple of years, really, is trying to separate drafting someone for talent or drafting someone because, okay, that would make us better right now. And with VJ Edgecombe, I think that there's something right now, but overall, similar to what James said about Trey Johnson, I think we need that offensive firepower, though VJ Edgecombe points to all the factors that the Hornets like. So that's the kind of iffy part about it. I would like to know what y'all's opinion is, just because I do think VJ is more of a let's make the team better right now. But as we all discussed, picking at 4, that opens the window for doing more to the roster.
I mean, a couple of interesting things on VJ, and there's loads of like really good intel out there. I think he was a really late riser. So in high school, he wasn't a 5-star. So I've heard this discussed about. He really learned how to play off the ball, not to play with the ball in his hands all the time. You look at someone like Ace Bailey, completely different type of situation. All right, like never played really without the ball, and that you saw some of those struggles come out this year. So I think that's good because you're going to go to the NBA. Not like none of these kids are likely to be number 1 options on a team. So you need to be able to learn that. And for some, it's harder than others. And he's got that. Here's an interesting one. VJ Edgecombe played 1 hour away from where Jeff Peterson used to live in Brooklyn. He played his high school ball there. So Jeff Peterson will have seen VJ Edgecombe a ton. He was also had a 3.8 GPA, which I believe in American languages, he's a smart kid. So there's a bunch of other stuff here, like off the game. I mean, I watched 2 games of the Bahamas tape, which is interesting because he played a slightly different role with Bahamas in the FIBA qualifiers last summer. And you can go watch him against like senior men competition, against like some top 20 ranked countries in the world. They played against Poland. They played against Greece as well, without Giannis. You know, there's interesting film there. And I was more impressed with that than I was actually with the Baylor film. And that was a higher quality of standard. But I mean, his hustle like popped there. I think 2 things where he is overrated. 1, the athleticism. It really pops in the highlights. But in the half court, it doesn't show up. All right. Like, I don't want people to start thinking that he's just going to like explode past everyone in the half court. That's not really his game right now. I think the other side is the defense. He is a good event creator and he has some highlight defensive plays, which are going to make all the YouTube videos. But like possession, you do not feel him anything like a Suggs or Caruso or like any of those elite defensive guards. He is not that right now. He is someone who shows that he has some anticipation, some gifts, but he is not a consistent defender right now. And like all the synergy numbers will just like back that up on defense. Like you think they'd really pop, but defensively they have him below average guarding all jump shots. He is below average at the rim as well. So like those are 2 pretty key areas if you're going to be a good defender, and he's below average in both of those in his synergy film. So he's an interesting prospect to watch. Only again, I watched all of his 3-point shots this year. Only took, here we go, what is it? 17 threes off the dribble all year. And he didn't take 1 off the dribble, I think, until January. Like, he just wasn't in his game. So he is purely a catch and shoot player. Shot 43% on open catch and shoot threes, 28% on contested catch and shoot threes. So you give him open in the corner, like on perimeter, he'll probably make it. But he's not going to be shooting over guys. He's not going to be getting to his own shot. So there is a little bit, not as much versatility in that 3-point shot that you might expect normally for a premier shooting guard prospect.
Yeah, he's interesting too. Duke recruited Edgecombe, and it's a guy that Duke wanted in Durham. It would have been interesting to see if he had been there, to see what he would have looked like in Duke's 5-out, sort of like orbiting around Cooper. I think that could have been a fun like play finishing type role for Edgecombe. Could have maybe opened up some more drives in the half court for him. I say all of that to preface like the context that Baylor wasn't ideal for him this year in many ways. I mean, this is a team that was very undersized, especially once their starting center or one of their top big guys went down middle of the season. They were forced to play a lot of sort of like junk defense, zone, matchup zone. And I do sort of wonder how stuff like that can impact some of the sort of like, I hesitate to say tracking data, but the sort of like defensive, play type data in terms of contesting and, points per possession, like that kind of stuff. And then just like Baylor didn't really have like the supplementary shooting to really like open things up in the half court. This is a lot of like 5 out with Norchad O'Meara or pick and roll with Jeremy Roach or Robert Wright or Edgecombe. He could have had a better setup this season, I think, in terms of like positioning him for pick and roll, opening the floor up. And I do think it is worth, he did start playing better come January this season. And I'm not surprised that like the off dribble 3-point shooting numbers like picked up, because that is around when it felt like he sort of like hit another level in terms of like half court creation. Don't think it was perfect by any means. And I watched one of his games against Houston a couple of weeks ago, and he got just obliterated by the Cougars in that game. They just got, and they do that to a lot of guards. That Houston's defense is designed to just sink its teeth into ball handlers like that. But he had some tough showings even after it felt like he had sort of like rounded a corner for Baylor this season. Can I throw out one other name? And again, I think this will be four is probably a little too early. But what about Yakachonis? Is that 4 is too early, right? I think all of us have him probably top 10 or, just around there. But his playmaking, the pick and roll creation, like this sort of like tall initiator with some off dribble shooting capabilities. Thoughts on him, or is 4 like comically just too high for him as a prospect?
I think it's too high. I think it's a little too high. I like his skill set, and I like that like long frame guard, like you mentioned. That's kind of the players I'm a little drawn to, but I just don't see how it plays out. I see how he could be useful to any NBA team, even ours, but I just don't see what does that do for us moving forward. But time will only tell. But I just don't see how his skill set really changes anything with our team, the way we like to play. The only thing is I don't like we're so LaMelo reliant right now, and I think he would help alleviate that. But I just don't know if it will be enough to where there's so many holes in other places. I just don't know if it'll be enough.
That's fair. Any other thoughts on Yakachonis, or how about Derek Queen? If the Hornets were to look center, James, where are you between Malawach and Queen in terms of which center you have rated higher in the 2025 draft?
Yeah, I've got them right next to each other, my big board at 9 and 10, but they are in a separate tier to the earlier names that we picked. I even had CMB and Jeremiah Fears in that group as well. I think there's just too many questions with both of those guys. And I don't quite see the super high upside for either. I think they'll both be solid NBA bigs. I just much rather take a roll of the dice here in one of these wings.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that assessment. I see Malawach being a starter in the NBA for a long time. I see Queen having the potential for that, with maybe the potential to become an offensive hub in the half court. But I think looking wing is probably the way to go. Well, look, we'll have plenty of time to get into all of these prospects the next few months. This was certainly an interesting night for the Hornets and for the NBA. Guys, any parting thoughts before we get out of here? And again, knowing that there's going to be lots to discuss really over the next like six weeks probably for Charlotte.
Just wanted to say,
can we just shout out
go ahead. Hey, just wanted to say good to be with you guys. I'm sure I'll see you again before the draft, but certainly when we get to free agency and cap season. So, but thanks for having me on. Always appreciate it. Still a listener. So hear you guys in the car on a walk every single week. You're doing good stuff. James, the addition of you has been huge as well. So happy to have you with the BuzzBeat crew. And as always, hats off to Richie with the P's and the Q's in the background. So good to be with you, boys.
Yeah. I must say it's important to mention this real quickly. Like, it's been very, I think this past season we really sort of like pieced it together with duct tape and chewing gum and just sort of like batted down the hatches and got through the season. But it's been very exciting, speaking for myself, with the additions of Matt and James, and sort of like how that's invigorated and charged things. What I wanted to bring up is that all of this stuff is possible because of Richie and Spencer starting this podcast 10 years ago, like, basically. And so it makes me very happy as someone who came in about 8 years ago, which is a little hard to believe, but to see it sort of like finding, it's not a second wind, it's like its 22nd wind of the pod is really fun. I was sort of hoping that we would be able to ride the Cooper flag wave, but that ship has sailed, and there's still much to discuss. But yeah, James, any other thoughts on any other parting thoughts here?
I think the big thing, hey, we have 1,400 people listening in live right now, which
Awesome.
is a large number.
Wow.
So we just want to say, hey, and it's been at that for like the last 30 minutes here. So shout out to everyone listening in. If you know us, great. If you don't, welcome to BuzzBeat. And now is the time to sign up. If you want to hear more about analysis, we're going to have prospect breakdown pods on all the guys. We're going to be looking at second round sleepers for the 2 picks. You can go to the BuzzBeat podcast Substack. You can sign up. If you want to be a paid subscriber, there's a bunch of extra perks. I won't run through them all, but you can find them on the BuzzBeat. And I believe there's a lottery discount, which we're running today, the day of the draft lottery. So just wanted to get that in before we get out of here now.
Yeah, let me go ahead and get that in. If you are considering a yearly subscription to BuzzBeat Plus, we have a lottery sale happening right now. You get the same perks for 20% off, and it must be redeemed before May 15th. It's, I believe, Thursday this week. Visit the link in the episode notes or through our social media, and it'll take you to where you need to get to go. That's a $75 value for $60. So if you're interested in that, take advantage of it before it's not too late. I must say the community in the Substack has been really fun. There were people talking all throughout the day and throughout the lottery in there. So if you're looking for a bunch of dead-ender Hornets fans, or just people who love basketball and the NBA, it's a fun place to be. And as we sort of discussed, there's much to discuss. Darian, James, Spencer, thank you guys for coming on here and helping me try to make sense of an interesting night in NBA history. Richie, thank you for producing, and for everyone who tuned in, listened, or will be listening to this on the podcast tomorrow, which will show up in all of your feeds. We really appreciate it. We're looking forward to talking hoops throughout the summer. You can definitely bank on more pods coming, if not later this week, then early next week, and we'll be diving into plenty of draft prospects and other offseason content. So thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see